Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Polygamist Daughter, Anna LeBaron with Leslie Wilson. Let's go ahead and get into it. Do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into chapter 28. I woke with an early start, forgetting for a moment where I was. All the lights in the bedroom were on, but I didn't recognize the room or the bed I was lying on. Celia was asleep next to me, and I shook her. Hey, wake up. No, she moaned and rolled over. When I sat up and got my bearings, the horror of the recent hours bludgeoned me with full force. Mark was dead. Lillian was a widow, and I had lost the closest thing I ever had known to a real father. Although Mark was only 17 years older than I was, he had maturity beyond his years. He had led his wife and family well by escaping the LeBaron cult and guiding them toward relationships with Jesus. He owned and ran a successful small business and provided for his children to go to private Christian school. He even took on the causes of others, fatherless boys and girls like me. He and Lillian had shown me more kindness, generosity, discipline, and guidance than anyone I'd ever known. His murder was senseless. I just couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that Mark was dead. And not just dead, but murdered. Violently killed in his place of business. Who would do such a thing? Rumors among family members were whispered in hushed tones. But for now, I couldn't release my pain through tears. The children needed me. Lillian needed me. I knew I had to be strong to help the others bear their pain. Still, the fear was there as always, knotting up my insides, deep down in my gut. I rose quickly and cut so deep I thought it might split me in two. The fear that they would come back for more of us was a constant threat hanging over our heads. I heard a faint knock on the bedroom door, and Marianne came in. I lifted my right hand and gave her a little wave. She crossed the room, sat on the end of the bed, and whispered, "The police have said it's safe for all of you to go back home." I propped myself up on both elbows. "Okay, I'll wake up Celia and we'll get the kids ready to go." Melvin drove half of Lillian's children and me home. Don followed close by with Celia and the other children. When we pulled into the driveway, I spotted at least 4 police officers and SWAT team members in front of the yard and by the street. Melvin and one of the officers searched the house before they allowed any of us to get out of the truck and Don's car. We waited in the vehicles until we saw Don wave the all clear signal from the front door. Once inside, Celia and I helped the kids get ready for bed. I'm noticing nothing else has been said about her sickness. So maybe that statement was right. Oh boy. Several. I think, wait. Once inside, Celia and I helped the kids get ready for bed. Several never stopped sobbing through the nighttime ritual. Okay. We sang the younger ones a couple of songs and kissed them good night. Without fail, children in each room asked us to leave on a lamp or even the overhead light. I doubted they'd get much sleep. When Celia and I rejoined the adults in the living room, I looked at everyone's face. This room, that was usually such a happy place, was now filled with grief, tension, and something else I couldn't quite pinpoint at first. Fear. Yes, even the men were afraid. I clutched Celia's arm, and she and I huddled close together on the couch, the same way they did when they were little kids. Those two always found, comfort in each other. Celia couldn't stop crying, so I scooted into the kitchen to grab some tissues, but the box was empty. I grabbed a clean dish towel and handed it to Celia as I sat back down on the couch. The police officer who had escorted us into the house stood near the front door with a little notepad in his hand. He looked over and said, "Lillian is still at the police station, but she should be here shortly. When she arrives, we're going to ask you young ladies to help her identify possible suspects." How are we going to do that? Celia asked. We weren't there. We didn't see anything. The officer glanced at Melvin, cleared his throat, and continued. Good question. Actually, we believe the shooter may be someone you know. The color drained from Celia's face, and her hands suddenly got clammy. What? You think we know the person who did this? Yes, we do, because the attacks were coordinated to occur at the same time in 3 different locations. We have reason to believe someone orchestrated them, perhaps directed by someone affiliated with your family's religious group. I closed my eyes and shuddered. Years after my father's death, his legacy of control and killing lived on. It had only been 7 months ago that Don Jordan had been killed in cold blood. Most likely, someone I knew well was responsible, possibly even one of my own brothers. That is scary. I dozed off for a while, though I occasionally heard Celia ask the police officer or Melvin a question. Their low voices sounded muffled and far away. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the house. An engine was whirling loudly, but not in front of the house. It was overhead. The police officer's walkie-talkie crackled, and a voice squawked. The helicopter is in position. What? What is going on? The police officer whispered something to Melvin, and he ran to the window and pulled back a corner of the blinds to look. Fully awake now, I josted Celia. She looked at me, her face clouded with confusion. I whispered, "There's a helicopter hovering over the house." Moments later, the walkie-talkie went off again. "She's here. All units stand by." The officer quickly lowered the volume. The front door flew open, and another uniformed officer entered with Lillian, a third officer right behind him. Celia and I rushed to embrace our sister. She was shaking. The 3 of us huddled in a tight circle, whispering words of comfort to one another. Although Lillian was crying, she didn't make a sound. Suddenly, she gulped in air and stepped back from us. "I need your help." Celia spoke first. We'll do whatever you need." I nodded in agreement. One of the officers stepped forward with what looked like a large photo album. "We need you to look through these mugshots and see if you recognize anyone who could possibly have shot Mark." At the mention of her husband's name, Lillian winced and began sobbing again. I handed her the dish towel, and she dabbed the corners of her eyes. "Come on, girls, let's do this." We sat down on the couch and began leafing through the pages, seeing people we all knew. Occasionally, we would stop and linger on a photo, recalling scenes with that person from our past, all of which seemed like distant memories. We remember loved ones the way we once knew them, not as suspects in the aftermath of the crimes committed. Still, we followed the officer's instructions and indicated a few possibilities before closing the book. Between the whirl of the hovering helicopter and the continuous squawking of the walkie-talkies, sleep was next to impossible that night. I appreciate the fact that these officers are taking this seriously, and that in some ways their presence and them being there is protecting them. The few times I did drift off, I dreamed of men with guns storming the appliance store. I woke up sweating and trembling. Thankfully, as I looked around, most everyone else was sleeping soundly. The next morning, I got up and put milk and boxes of cereal on the dining room table so everyone could help themselves if they were hungry. Celia and I helped dress and feed the younger children. The older ones walked around the house like zombies, their eyes swollen and red. When Lillian eventually emerged from her bedroom, Celia held her arm to steady her, leading her to the table. No one said much, other than the drone of the helicopter that intermittently circled the house and the surrounding area. It was eerily quiet. 29. The next days were a blur. Lillian could barely function, her emotions constantly on edge. I overheard one of the officers talking to her after she had received a menacing, possibly life-threatening phone call. Tension gripped the entire household despite the continued police presence. We were all jumpy, our nerves frayed from fear of losing our very lives. A SWAT team continued to surround the house, and occasionally we heard helicopters overhead. Every hour on the hour, a uniformed officer or an FBI agent knocked on the door and asked permission to search the house and check on us. They often met with the adults about any plans for the day. Officers escorted us everywhere we went, even to the grocery store. I wish they knew who did this. They had tiny receivers in their ears with wires that ran down the back of their shirt collars, and they occasionally lifted their heads and spoke into equally tiny microphones on their wrists. I decided not to leave the house until the chaos passed. The night before Mark's funeral, more family members than I could count filled the house. They came in town from all over the United States and Mexico. Mom, Lillian, Kathleen, and I stood in Lillian's closet, helping her pick out clothes. I don't know why part of me wondered if her mom knows who did this, but I just felt that, like, I wonder. I set up an ironing board into the living room and began ironing clothes for Lillian and the children to wear the next day. In the middle of the task, the house suddenly went completely dark. Even though we were still under police protection, my mind leapt from scene to scene of the few horror movies I'd watched in my life where the unsuspecting victim is ambushed and killed in some gruesome manner. I just knew I'd be next. My knees buckled, and adrenaline coursed through my veins, causing my breath to come in shallow pants. I broke out in cold sweat, and chills ran up and down my spine. Feeling my way in the dark, I made it safely to Lillian's bedroom. A large group of us huddled there, whispering to one another about what we should do. Panicked voices questioned where the children were and how everyone was doing. I just wanted to find a safe place to hide. Lillian hissed, "Everyone, be quiet, please." A hush immediately settled over us. I heard a faint whisper, "What do you want us to do?" I could hear the fear in Celia's voice. "Let me think for a moment." I heard whispering again. All of a sudden, I felt someone at my arm. "Who's this?" Lillian asked. "It's Anna. Go hide in the bathroom. Lie down in the tub." I cautiously made my way down the hall, trying not to bump into anyone else. I tried to regulate my breathing by slowly inhaling and exhaling. I finally felt the thin strip of molding around the bathroom door and went inside and closed the door behind me. Faint moonlight filtered by a cloud cover came through the window and dimly lit the tiny bathroom, enough for me to see the tub. I climbed in, pulled the shower curtain closed, and hunkered down. The tub's coldness quickly seeped through my clothes, chilling me to my core. I wish I had brought something to wrap myself in. I felt so exposed. My body began to shake, and once again my breaths came fast, each one reverberating off the towel surrounding me, making them seem louder than they were. I have to get control of myself. They'll find me. Curled up in a fetal position, I waited. I fully expected gunmen to enter the house and start shooting us, just like they had at Mark, Ed, Dwayne, and Jenny. Would they kill us all? Or would some of my family members manage to get away? Where's the SWAT team? I thought they were supposed to be protecting us. Moments later, I heard the hinge on the bathroom door squeak as someone opened it slowly. I held my breath, panicked. My heart raced as I tried to flatten myself even more in the tub. Would dying from a gunshot wound hurt? Would I die quickly? Instinctively, I covered my head with my hands. Footsteps padded across the floor in my direction. I heard the sound of the shower curtain ring sliding on the rod as the curtain was pushed aside, and I braced myself for the worst. I squeezed my eyes shut. Suddenly, I felt a foot brush up against mine as someone stepped into the tub. Even though it startled me, I knew better than to scream out. But every nerve in my body was ignited. Whoever had joined me was hunkered down at the other end of the tub. It's someone I know. Neither of us spoke. Quietly, we both pulled the shower curtain closed again to conceal ourselves, leaving us in the dark. After what seemed like a long time, I heard the SWAT team members calling out for us. All clear, everything's secure. I released a heavy sigh and climbed out of the tub. I'm glad that's over. I was so scared. Who's there? It's me, Celia. I let out a long breath. Yeah, I'm letting out a long one too. Ooh. I was so anxious in that moment. Ooh. We stepped out of the bathtub and I led the way back into the living room. I don't understand why the lights were off in the first place, but I guess we'll see. Just as we entered, the lights came back on. The large room, now overflowing with SWAT team members and my family, seemed small. I heard murmurings asking what happened. Quiet, please. An officer got our attention. When everyone stopped talking, he continued. Sorry about that, folks. A circuit breaker flipped and cut all the electricity to the house. Earlier today, an electrician installed a motion detecting floodlights around the house. On a routine pass around the perimeter, 2 of our SWAT guys on patrol set off the floodlights. That surge was enough to flip the circuits to the whole house. Oh, they're really trying to make sure that they protect this family, but you're scaring them in the process. I didn't care how the outage happened. I just felt relieved that the crisis had ended without anyone dying. After a fitful night's sleep, I woke to shouting from the living room. Everyone, please come in here. I have a few announcements. I hurried out with my other relatives and noticed that, like me, everyone had on their same clothes from the night before. All of us too scared to change into pajamas. Who knew if there might be an attack or if we might have to leave suddenly? That's so scary. That is so like to live like that. A different SWAT officer, this one with a dark complexion, probably Mexican, stood near the front door and held a clipboard. He went through travel instructions for each of us, telling us which car we would ride in to the funeral and with whom. We quickly ate, changed clothes, and got ready to leave. I put on a long black pencil skirt and a loose white cotton top. Celia and I were put in the same group, along with Ramona and a few others, and we left the house by 8:30 to go to the funeral home. Don drove us and tried to make conversation on the way, although he gave up after several one-word answers. Clearly, no one felt like talking that morning. When we pulled into the driveway entrance to the funeral home, a SWAT member holding a clipboard stopped the vehicle and gestured for Don to roll down the window. The SWAT member leaned over and peered into the car. Who do we have in this vehicle? Don pointed to each of us, one by one, and said our names. The man checked us off his list. Okay, you may proceed. Please drive slowly so I can identify the license number of this vehicle. I turned my head and watched him out the rear window. He made a couple more notes as we drove away. The funeral home was a red brick building with large white columns. Don dropped us off at the entrance. We were greeted by a male officer just inside the main double doors. Good morning, everyone. I'm Agent Hassan. He pointed at Celia and me. Ladies, I need you to follow me. The rest of you, please wait here. He led us to a side office and seated us at a large wooden desk. He opened a file folder and took out a stack of papers, placing them in front of us. As I'm sure you can see, these are photos of your family members and other people in your father's church. I need you to go through and put them into 2 stacks, the good ones and the bad ones. Y'all are doing this at the funeral? Although there was some overlap with the photos we had already gone through at the house, most of these photos were new. I stared at Celia, my mouth agape in astonishment. She looked surprised as well. Agent Hanson placed both hands on the desk and leaned in toward us. Look, we're not messing around here. We want to keep all of you safe, and we cannot do that without your help. I imagine you trust the majority of these people, but we desperately need you to identify anyone who might cause trouble. We'll have plenty of plainclothes officers here today as well as at the gravesite. I knew immediately what might cause trouble meant. He might as well say, might kill someone today. Celia and I spent about 15 minutes sifting through photos of people from both the LeBaron family and my father's cult following. We identified a couple of people we weren't sure were safe. When we were done, Agent Hanson smiled and thanked us. As Celia and I got up to leave, he said, "Wait 1 minute, please. I need to take a photo of the both of you to add to the pile of good, safe people. Once that was done, he escorted us back out to the reception area. As others arrived at the funeral home, they were escorted to the back room, too, for the same procedure. I don't remember much about the funeral itself, but I know my mother sang the hymn, "Oh, My Father." I was still taking the medication for my walking pneumonia, which combined with the trauma of the situation made things fuzzy. Still, one memory remains crystal clear. I recall seeing Jim Coates, a retired sheriff who was a family friend, standing at the back of the funeral home during the service. Despite all the SWAT and FBI presence, what made me feel more secure was knowing Jim was there, gun in hand, ready to protect us should anything go down. After the service, the family got into 6 or 7 limos to transport all of us to the cemetery. As we pulled out, I noticed snipers perched in trees around the funeral home. This is so like, you don't even get a chance to process anything because not only are you dealing with the fact that you lost your loved one, but you're surrounded by these things that are there to, in essence, protect you. But the scariness of it all, in that there's snipers, because you may be on the same list and not even know it. Officials shut down Interstate 10 in Houston for the procession, and policemen in the cars and on motorcycles dotted the route. Like an event for a dignitary or a celebrity, the procession went on for miles. On the way, I looked out the back window of our limo. The line of cars behind us seemed to have no end. At the cemetery, the men of Spring Branch Church of God stood behind the family, acting as a human shield to the grieving family members of Mark, Ed, Dwayne, and Jenny, willing to take a bullet for us. Chapter 30. A heaviness settled over the house in the days following Mark's funeral. With his death, an emptiness enveloped us all. He had been a solid, steadying presence in my life. He had loved gadgets and always wanted to have the latest and greatest technology. He even owned one of the first cell phones, the kind that was so big it came in a bag. The FBI and police still provided protection for us. We feared for our lives because murder suspects were still on the loose, so officers were stationed in front of and behind the house to offer extra security. The kids, normally lively and boisterous, still played, but overall they were much more subdued. Lillian spent hours and hours alone in her room, emerging only to make sure the kids were fed. When she did come out, her children mobbed her, desperate to hold her hand, sit in her lap, or tell her about their day. Her eyes were hollow and lifeless. Seeing her in such a state unnerved me because she had always been so busy and energetic. I wonder where she was in the store when it happened. I wonder if she was anywhere nearby, like if she heard the shot, if I just wonder. The days went by in dull activity, with time passing in slow motion. I recovered from my illness, but I had no idea what my future held now. Short visits from my friends, including my school friend David, offered me some comfort and helped me see beyond the intense pain and heaviness of each day. Sorrow and fear lingered as well. Sorrow permeating mealtime and fear increasing at bedtime. The children begged to sleep with Lillian. She let them. At least they were able to cuddle together then during the day. Lillian was consumed by her grief and didn't have much to give them. So the children turned their focus to me, and I tried to keep them occupied. But it took a toll on me at night because I had a difficult time falling asleep. We didn't leave the house except for emergencies, for fear that someone might be lying in wait to try to kill us. The businesses was temporarily closed. One day, a bank matter needed to be taken care of at the office, so Lillian sent me. I was thankful that Don accompanied me to the empty and darkened building. The appliances inside were still covered with the black dust the authorities had used to lift fingerprints off them. As I entered the office, I gasped when I saw the bullet holes in the wall. Holes. So he wasn't even shot once. I also remember going to an eye doctor appointment not too long after the funeral. I was terrified the entire time driving there and back, worried that someone might follow and target me. The FBI had taught us evasive maneuvering tactics and reminded us to vary our routes if we had to drive to places we frequented, like church or a relative's house. They drilled into us how critical it was to never follow a distinct pattern with anything and to always keep on the lookout for family members we suspected. It struck me one day that when we were younger, the sister wives have taught us to fear the authorities, yet now we were cooperating with them for our protection. Yeah, it's all a guise to keep you bound. Let's make you feel like these people want to do all of these bad things to you when really we're the ones that are doing bad things to you, and we're not. You don't know that we're the ones doing bad things to you because some of the wives don't even realize that they're doing the bad things. And by bad things I mean like the emotional abuse and things of that nature. Now the men is a whole nother story, but I'm just saying, like it's keeping them bound because we don't want you all to figure out the truth. At one point, Jim Coates and his wife, Bonnie, invited me to come stay with them for a while. Lillian had plenty of help from other siblings and the women from the church, so I didn't feel guilty leaving her and the kids. Besides, if she needed me, I wasn't that far away. The Coates home proved to be a welcome respite for me. I hung on every word Jim said to me, soaking up his wisdom and street smarts as he drew from his law enforcement background to give me advice on how to stay safe. He was rough around the edges, but he provided comfort and security. One evening, before I headed to church, Jim asked me to join him on the piano. "I have something for you." I followed him out the sliding glass door and sat down at the table. "You and Bonnie have done so much for me already. That's really not necessary." "I think it is." Jim opened a wooden box on the table. He took out something wrapped in a maroon cloth and placed it on the table between us. "What is this?" I lifted one side of the cloth and pulled it back. Underneath rested a silver .25, I don't know how these are called, caliber gun. I don't know how to shoot. Now don't argue with me. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. But I firmly believe you need to carry this weapon with you at all times. For your safety and for the safety of your family. His deep blue eyes bored holes into mine. I agreed. Over the next week, Jim taught me how to hold the gun properly, gave me shooting lessons, and showed me how to clean it safely. The small gun felt odd in my hand. He told me that if I was ever stopped and questioned by the police, I needed to tell them I was transporting it from my home to my workplace or the other way around. Jim taught me many other tactical things as well. He said if I ever felt threatened, I should crouch down and make myself a small target, as small of a target as possible. And if someone came at me, I should stand with my back against a wall and defend myself from that position. I can still remember the feeling of the gun tucked into the pocket of my cotton shorts that summer, especially how it banged against my leg when I walked. When I carried it, I was reminded that I could still be a target. Near the end of the summer, the security presence around the house was lessened, and Lillian used some of the money from Mark's life insurance to fly out to California with her children to stay in the home of some friends who were on vacation. The authorities agreed that having Lillian out of the state would be preferable to having her where she would be recognized. I was left behind to manage the house and business, which we had reopened, helped by a few other family members. After they'd been gone about a month, Lillian brought me a plane ticket, using an assumed name for me, Amanda Glass. This was before IDs were required for air travel, so all I had to do was show up at the airport with ticket in hand. I plan to attend some Bill Gothard training seminars here, and you'll get a little break from running the shop, Lillian told me on the phone. I appreciated the invitation, but soon after I arrived in California, I realized the real reason she actually wanted me to come. She wanted me to help her start homeschooling the children. She had invested in a teaching curriculum put out by Bill Gothard's Advanced Training Institute of America, ATIA, and she needed my help to implement the program. I don't think I can do that, Lillian. I've been talking with a few of my old friends, and I really want to finally go to the International Institute of Accelerated Christian Education. Prior to Mark's death, both he and Lillian had wholeheartedly approved of my decision to attend there. I desperately needed the familiarity and support of my friends, the support that my friends offered. I struggled with what I should do because I didn't want to disappoint Lillian. I knew she needed help and was used to having my help, but I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to continue putting her needs above my own. Well, that's fair. That's fair. Well, would you at least stay with the children while I go to Chicago to meet Mr. Gothard and attend the training? Of course. I bowed my head, disappointed that Lillian would expect me to continue putting my life on hold for her family. I was 19 now, and I needed to start making decisions for myself. When Lillian got back from the training, she bubbled over with the idealistic notions of how schooling her children would play out. She begged me once more to stay with them. When I declined, she sent me back to Houston. Yeah, I mean, Lillian, come on. I get it that you lost your husband, and now you doing this whole Gothard thing. And I just feel like your sister, it's time for her to live for herself. A few weeks later, Lily and the children returned to Houston. Celia, the friends who dropped in to check on us, and I could all see that Lillian's mental state had continued to decline in the months after Mark's passing. Lillian's mood swings were dramatic, from high to low, making it necessary for her to take prescription medication to keep balance. However, when she returned to Houston, the reality of her situation and Mark's death settled in, causing her to sink in a deep depression. I wonder if she's going to go to school now. I was caught in a conundrum. Part of me believed I owed it to her to stay in Houston and help her with the children and Reliance Appliance after all she had done for me. The other part of me longed to join my friends at college and begin life on my own terms. I knew that if I didn't separate my life from hers at that juncture, it would likely never happen. Lillian depended on me so much that it felt suffocating. I sought solace from Celia and counsel from some of the older women at church. They encouraged me to follow my dreams, go to college, and enjoy my young adult years if that's what I wanted. Yes, I agree. I think that that's right. She's done a lot. Here's the thing. I'm not negating the fact that her sister and her brother-in-law were there for her, but some of you guys even said it in the comments, like she was 13 years old and she was doing things that some of us adults weren't even doing. So the fact that this girl at 13 was running stores and doing all that stuff, like let her live her life for herself and figure out what she wants to do. I continuously prayed about the decision and sensed the Lord calling me to go to school. Lillian supported my decision to go to college. She still had help from some of her friends and fellow church members who were bringing meals, taking care of the kids, and doing grocery shopping. Jim Coates drove me to Louisville, Texas, and dropped me off at the ACE campus. ACE. I carried in my few possessions and stopped at the admissions office. A kind woman met me and ushered me to her desk. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Joan Baker, Director of Admissions. She smiled constantly, causing wrinkles to form around the corners of both eyes. It's nice to finally be here. I twisted my hands in my lap and tried to focus on her face instead of letting my eyes wander around the room. As you know, we're happy to have you as part of our student body. However, as we discussed over the phone, the administration has some concerns. If parents of other students find out about the recent events in your family, especially since one of the murderers took place nearby, they might be gravely concerned that their children could be at risk with you going to school here. Oh, man. Oh, man. We don't agree with that. In fact, we would never have admitted you and invited you here if we didn't believe all of our students, including you, would be safe, okay? But it's critical that we keep those events a secret, or we could have parents overreact and withdraw their students from our school. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the desk. Do you think you can do that? I nodded and said yes. There's one more condition. Joan rifled through some papers on her desk, selected one, and pushed it towards me. We need you to go by a different name while you're here. Oh, wow. The LeBaron name carries too much notoriety. Would, I don't know how to say her name, Keturah, Baron, be all right with you? Katura? I stared at the paper in front of me and read it quickly. Yes, I can do that. I chewed on my lower lip and signed my old name on the dotted line, agreeing that I would use my new name here at school. For a long time, most students never knew my real name or anything about my history. Then one day, a friend asked if she could look at my high school class ring so she could see the details on it. Without thinking, I slid my ring off my finger and handed it to her. She read the engraving on the side. Hey, why does it say Anna K. LeBaron? Blood rushed over my face and neck, and I stammered before answering. Listen, I can't really discuss it, but would you just keep it between us, please? I hope my eyes begged enough. My friend agreed and placed the ring in the palm of my hand. A few weeks later, I lay on the top bunk in the room I shared with a girl named Chrissy when I heard a voice. That's odd. The voice came from inside of me, but it seemed different from my other thoughts. The voice said, when someone dies, you can't go back. What does that mean? I finally concluded that I couldn't go back in time to undo things, to make the outcome different. When someone dies, they're dead. They're gone. I accepted the explanation, even though I wondered why such a thought came to me. The next morning was Saturday, my day to do laundry. I was sorting my clothes when the phone in the room rang. Chrissy answered the phone and handed the phone to me, then disappeared down the hall. Hello? Anna? Is there someone nearby who cares about you? Oh, no. Whenever somebody says that, it's not good news. It is not good news. And her thing was, if someone dies, you can't go back. Let's see what plays out. Celia's words filled me with dread as I stared out the dorm room window at the cloudy North Texas day. Lillian is dead, isn't she? The words just popped out. Anna, go get someone who cares about you and come back to the phone. Lillian committed suicide, didn't she? Please go get someone and come back to the phone. I hollered down the hall for Chrissy. She hurried back from a friend's dorm room. I've got someone with me now. What is it? You're right, Anna. Lillian is dead. She committed suicide and Emily found her body this morning. Please contact Jim Coates and ask him to go to the house and not let anyone near the kids who might tell them that Lillian didn't go to heaven because she committed suicide. That should be the last thing you're worrying about right now. But unfortunately, this is what happens a lot in the community. I said, recalling a tragic memory from when Isaac committed suicide at Lillian's house. Several people at Spring Branch Church of God told me that because he took his own life and didn't have time to ask God for forgiveness, he would go to hell. I didn't want Lillian's children to hear that devastating lie, so I needed someone to run interference until I could get there. I just had to protect them. I wanted them to know their mom and dad were now together in heaven. I will. Celia hung up the phone. I stood there, frozen, holding the receiver up to my ear as if somehow my refusal to put it down would negate the conversation. I turned around and saw the look of horror on Chrissy's face. She stumbled toward me and hugged me tightly. I drove to Houston with Bob and Phyllis Carpus and their kids, friends from Spring Branch Church. Once I arrived, I felt the weight of many decisions. Lillian's sister-in-law, Laura, and I picked out Lillian's clothes for burial and then drove to the funeral home to identify the body. This is sad. Despite the fact that Laura was still grieving the death of her daughter, Jenny, and her ex-husband, Dwayne, she was a big support to me in planning the funeral. I had just turned 20 a month before, and I felt the burden of making decisions that were far beyond my years. When Laura and I arrived at the funeral home, the director ushered us into the room where Lillian was lying in the casket. We took one look at her and decided that the garish makeup that the mortician had applied wasn't Lillian's style. I don't think I said that right. Garish. Jarish. Alexa, how do you pronounce Garish?
Okay, here's pronunciations. It is pronounced as garish.
Garish. That the garish makeup that the mortician had applied wasn't Lillian's style at all. I gotta look that up. In her final caring act for her sister-in-law, Laura pulled out her own makeup to soften Lillian's look. I was thankful she made her appear more like the Lillian we knew and loved. I've seen like videos where people do like their family members' hair or their makeup and things of that, and that just has to take a different level of strength, because I can't begin to imagine. Lillian's funeral was a small affair with mostly local family in attendance. A few of her sisters came into town to pay their respects and figure out what would happen to the kids. Lillian was dressed in clothes Laura and I had chosen: a pretty white button-down shirt with small pleats down the front and a long mauve skirt with a modest gathering around the waist. She looked like she was ready to go to church. I don't remember much about the funeral itself. I focused my energy and attention on taking care of the kids and being there for them. At the visitation the night before the funeral, I had made sure I accompanied them into the room for viewing. I wanted to protect them as best as I could, but I also knew they needed to see their mother in order to have closure. At the service, we sang "It Is Well With My Soul." My mom loves that song. One of Lillian's favorites. After the funeral, while I was still in Houston, I took care of the kids and stuffed my own feelings down. Lillian's death pushed all of us, me, her children, Celia, and my other siblings who knew her well, closer to the brink. Mark and Lillian had served as my surrogate parents for all of my teenage years. Yeah. Trying to grieve both of their deaths and the gaping hole they left in our family overwhelmed me to the point that avoidance of my emotions felt like a better route, certainly a safer one. Although many of my family members thought I would be the natural person to fill Lillian's shoes, I just couldn't face the idea of raising the children alone. I might have been the closest person in their young lives, but I didn't have the strength to do the job well. And that is okay. That is okay not to. I think that a lot of times it's expected for family members to take over, which is why sometimes I wonder, especially in some of the crime stories that I do, why it is that certain family members don't take over. And I think when we hear things like this, that explains why. Like, she was too busy. First of all, she's young. Second of all, she's too busy trying to just function from day to day to then have to add that onto her plate. And she hasn't dealt with anything yet, because even when her brother-in-law was killed, she was too busy trying not to cry to be there for the children that she didn't deal with it. So there's a lot that she's dealing with. Thankfully, a couple from the church, Bob and Phyllis, offered to take in all 6 of Mark and Lillian's children. Now that is beautiful. And we're going to stop right here. This was a heavy reading this week. Like, there's nothing but warning signals on the thumbnails. So hopefully we'll go back into a little bit of joy. But the reality of the situation is, this is the story for Anna, and she's doing a great job. You guys, let me know what you thought of this reading. Until next time.